strange silence, and sort of, we felt that we've been a little bit, blocked out. And I'm not necessarily thinking it's a big conspiracy or like there's a coordinated movement. I think some of it just like simply comes from a lot of people don't want to hear about Trump, don't want to see Trump, don't want to talk about him. I think, and it's like I was saying to your colleagues, it's like, you just got a divorce, and I want to show my movie about divorce to you. You don't necessarily want to see that. Um, I I don't know. I think I've been asked a number of like many versions of this question before. I was like, after the January 6th, people ask me like, so like, how do you gonna like do a movie about him now? You know, a year before the elections, we were like, okay, what are you gonna do if the movie comes before the election? When we were releasing, we were like, okay, now are you gonna like, do you want to affect the election? When he won, people were saying, okay, what do you think now? And in a way, I think the dust hasn't settled yet. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it might have settled in terms of the results of the American elections, but it hasn't settled in terms of his political legacy and the relationship of, our movie The Apprentice with the person who is, the president elect now. But no matter where this goes, and there's no, there's no secret that I really dislike him, and his like, not necessarily as a human being. Like, I don't have anything like, I don't have like hate against him. I just think he's a very like bad manager. I wouldn't give my corner store to him to run. And I think he's been extremely lucky, as he has everything he's touched has turned to shit, but he still gets another chance and another. I wish I get that luck in my life, which was very good, encouraging signs, because honestly, I was telling my team, I was like, I don't know what the point of campaigning is, and because I was so sort of disappointed, not because I think, oh, it's movie's so great, we have to get nominated and be acclaimed, but I felt it was like a sort of, we don't want to talk about this. And problem for that, again, tied back to your question, is I feel like since Cannes we haven't got the chance to talk about this movie as a movie. We've been talking about everything with him, and I've been playing like a fake political analyst, which I'm not, but nobody has still asked me about the editing.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that we got nominated for editing. That's great. There are two other really great movies that have the same structure. One, Paul Thomas Anderson's movie, Boogie Nights, which has this like inverted V. It's like, until like half of the movie is happy and fun, is a comedy, and then it becomes something else. The other one, which we were really inspired by, is Barry Lyndon, which also has the same inverted V. It's basically that is like, if you want to visualize it, it's like Redmond Barry climbing up a ladder without knowing where it goes, then comes to the top of the ladder, then climbs down the same ladder, the other side. And I had really the strong feeling that should be the structure of this movie too, because it is really a tragedy. It's not. Yes, you can read all sorts of things into it, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but for me, it's a tragedy, and the tragedy being, that at some point where his powers, his success peaks, or as it peaks, his humanity is diminishing. And that is tragic. So yeah. Well, the whole thing with genre is, for me, is what happens when you so I come from, my background is like literature and architecture, and like the first stuff I was doing, it was like, you would call it art movies or experimental movies, whatever. And I realized, like, if I went and said, okay, I want to make like a strange movie about two ugly fat people who are walking around naked in the forest, who would like go say, go, good luck with that. I was like, they're trolls. And it's like, okay, now we have a movie, we can finance it, and I think I'm sort of trying to find a way of working within the confines of or structure of commercial cinema, but still like do what I'm interested in doing, which is exploring things that are maybe not completely sort of there's a subjectivity and there's a little bit of like detachment from everyday life, and kitchen sink realism and whatever you call it. But at the same time, I'm also really interested in this world. I'm also interested in observing our life and the absurdity of the life, and I think that's what makes life interesting. It's poetic and shitty at the same time. And if you only see the shitty side or the poetic side, I think they both become a bit too sort of monotonous and not exciting enough. And that's exactly what I explore with actors. I try to sort of get them to be, themselves and this other idea of this other person, character, whatever, at the same time, to be like stars and human beings at the same time, and I think that tension, is really interesting, and I think the transformation that they go through is very interesting. So, and I've been lucky that I work with people who have both the openness and the courage to go out there, go on limb, try to experiment things with open mind, but also have a certain power and toolbox and skill set that is like, okay, we're just not like jazzing around, but there is a sense of like purpose, from their side too, and banal thing is I see my actors as real artists, which means I feel obliged to give them the possibility and freedom to work, but also they have a responsibility too, and it goes both ways. I think, and this comes from my not very deep knowledge of US distribution, but even I can see that the US indie movie distribution is completely collapsed. It's like it used to be many more venues, many more companies, much more, like many more people who were willing to take chances and, do more, even, riskier stuff. And now it's like really narrowed down, to like a handful of people. And it has nothing, that aspect I don't think has to do with like, the movies of this year, including mine. I think it's just a shitty place, Why we got here, multiple reasons, there's complexity there, but we're there. I think another thing is like, the American film industry is just not very interested in political stuff. It's never been, it's like Hollywood has always been a relatively conservative place. And it still is, I don't think that they have become much more conservative since 2023, and like for example, now we finally made our we broke even, but we broke even in a very interesting way, which is for a movie which is has the kind of star power that we have, and the subject matter and being in English and all that, a sort of much smaller part of our revenues came from US than it should have been. But on the other hand, also much bigger part of, you can also say much bigger part came from international, which is a very interesting phenomenon, but I really think that this distribution situation needs help. I don't think that the market gonna like adapt itself and balance itself. But also the encouraging thing is, I feel there is a movement among younger people, which is like we actually want to go and watch movies in cinemas. So there's a little bit of that, okay, cinema as as this venue, valid venue that you go and have an experience. It's a little bit back, not back in the mass way, but in a maybe more niche way. But that's still helpful, But yeah, I mean, that problem is there, and it's not gonna go anywhere overnight. I don't know. That's the short answer. No, I was telling your colleagues that I feel like since I had my, say, slate of projects in mid or late 2010s, and then these 3 movies came out of. Since then, I think the world has changed so drastically, and I feel I've changed. So I really think that in order not to go on autopilot and just do the next one and the next one and the next one, I feel like I want to take a moment and look at what's happened, and look at our reality, because it's also interesting. Not only we're bad at creating and delivering political content for the audience, we're also quite bad at looking at our own contemporary. We're still there where we're making Second World War movies, and we're talking about the metaphoric value of it for now. I mean, it's quite absurd. You know what I mean? And nobody's talking about whatever, what happened in the 80s or even 90s or even 2000. You know what I mean? And I think that there is so much that has happened in the past 10, 15, 20 years that needs to be explored. And I know also why, it's that because it's difficult to look at things where you're sort of up close, but we really need to do that, to be relevant. So that's maybe what I'm excited about doing. Well, I think that's an interesting metaphor. What I can tell you is what's interesting about the characters of Roy Cohn and also Mr. Trump is that I think Cohn had this uncanny understanding of popular culture and media, and there was a performative aspect to what he was doing, and also he was this sort of very performative character who was openly closeted gay, like Liberace. It was the same sort of era, same type of character. And I think that performative aspect got in, Trump inherited that, worked on it, got much better, and had many hours in front of camera. So in a way, when, he showed up on the first debate, and basically, in 2015, and knocked everyone down from set, everyone was like, oh, he's an amateur, he's charming, he's not politician, he's real. But what it was this is a guy with half a century worth of media training, Yeah. And of course, this governor of Ohio who's been hiding in an office and doing 3 interviews, he has no chance against this guy, And yes, he's always, what's interesting with him, which has now become almost the norm for politicians, is he's always playing a character. He was playing character in the 70s, then he played another character in the 80s, he played another character in the 90s. Now he's you know what I mean? He's always, and one of the things I love about what Sebastian has done is he has cracked the code of doing a character who's playing a character. He's playing like a 3-layer meta thing,